Tony, just with so much newness after last year's squad, a lot of guys moving on, just what's your top objectives this fall, and what's kind of the status of health of guys? Are you all healthy? Are there guys sitting out this fall, anything like that?
Yeah, Hunter Inslee is a redshirt freshman from last year who had an injury and had to have surgery work done, and he's back to full strength other than throwing. There's a couple other guys that, because of nicks and knacks, we've slowed them down or sped them up depending on their case, but otherwise everybody's at the facility and they're active to some extent, so that's a good sign. And the players themselves, I don't like getting out in front of something or pumping something up too much, but the players have already gotten out in front of the whole deal of the newcomers and the returning guys. That's the same battle every program is fighting every year. I can't imagine being a junior college coach with the turnover they have. They quickly need to mesh together, and these guys have done that. And maybe it's because they're excited to have a semester of a little less restrictions with COVID, a little less. And maybe it's a mix of we got great kids coming back and good kids coming in, but it's been great. So our objectives can lean on being what they were last year, the year before, is orientate guys with who we are, what we're about, then let them show us what they can do in these inter squads we're about to have kick off. And then after that, kind of assess where we're at, strengths and weaknesses wise, and work with guys individually.
Yeah, who would you say has gotten out in front of making that happen from a player standpoint of bringing everyone together? And then how do you expect to approach the catcher position this season?
Sure. I think the newcomers are the ones that have gotten out in front of it. I mean, Logan Chambers showed up in the summer as a junior college transfer and just immediately went around and got to know everyone well and kind of is an easy guy to connect with. And then when you have freshmen come in, and I don't mean to individualize anyone yet because we haven't even had an inter squad, so we'll see what guys can do. But a guy like Chase Burns was drafted. A guy like Chris Moore came with a lot of fanfare. When guys like that show that they're team guys and they're not on campus to tell everyone what they did in high school achievement-wise or where Perfect Game or PBR ranked them, it just helps that stuff click a lot quicker. So, and then the catching position, I'll speak to you as if you're in our dugout. I've told them several times, it's open season. And when I first started coaching, we had a year like this. Max Scherzer had a catcher named J.C. Field he worked very well with. He caught every inning. After he left, his eligibility was up. We had a year like this year. It was about 6 or 7 guys back there. Now, all those guys aren't all just catchers. They play different positions too. But on any given day, Josh could have 4, 5, 6 guys he's working with, and we're willing to kind of try everything. Again, some of those guys are actually naturally infielders or outfielders. And then there's a guy like Evan Russell who's just all in on trying to catch, knowing full well he could maybe be an Alaric type guy for us where he could play second if we had to have him there, but is a really turn into a plus defender at left field. So open season, show us what you got. We've shown everyone that we're more than willing to use 2 or 3 guys back there during the course of a season. That's what I would prefer to do this year, spread the wealth a little bit, keep guys fresh, give guys opportunities, whatever umbrella you want to throw that under. But ultimately, we're looking to replace guys that were high character guys behind the plate in the last few years that were good teammates and the pitchers loved throwing to. Their skill set we could sit here and analyze all day long, but we're looking for guys that are good teammates behind home plate.
You've talked in past off seasons about continually wanting to grow and kind of get up that mountaintop with your program rebuilding. Just from what y'all accomplished last year and the guys y'all lost, just how does that challenge change?
Well, we lost our last 2 games last year. So that's the taste everyone has in their mouth right now in our facility. It certainly was a year to be proud of, and I think some of the guys that are finishing pro ball and coming back to work out at our facilities, they're very proud of the fact there's a 2021 Omaha appearance on the outfield wall, but that 2019 regional is something everyone's still very proud of. While I like to think that we've done some good things, again, we fall back on that deal of how we finished last year. That was the first time last year we had lost on back-to-back days, playing days, the entire season. So it adds a little extra motivation, a little bad taste, whatever it might be. But on the field is probably the most important part of your question. But then you get into other arenas like facilities, Still things we're trying to do around the office and things like that, just the structure of our program, recruiting. There's still a long way to go, and we would just like to stay on an incline. If something happens faster than we expected or you expected, great, but we just want to stay on an incline in all those areas and maybe even some ones I didn't mention.
Tony, what were some of the things that stood out to you about your guys in summer ball that maybe have you excited and pumped up?
Yeah, I think the guys you're sitting there next to in the dugout knowing, man, if it's not for this pandemic deal, they're probably out there in a normal year, but everyone's roster's kind of backlogged. A lot of older kids in our league and across the country last year. Seeing those guys go out and perform like, okay, at least I'm not wrong. You know, Trey Lipscomb, Kyle Booker, those guys perform very well. I think Charlie Taylor, if it wasn't for a set of circumstances, is not a redshirt catcher, just kind of going off the cuff. Those guys threw well. And then some of the other guys, too, that just stuck around and worked with Coach Q in the weight room, seeing that they were motivated and hungry was key, because the summer is after a long cycle of playing, and it's a long way away from the spring. So to see a guy with a little bit of fire in his eyes and a good plan in the weight room, Coach Q doesn't give you much room for leeway on any of that stuff. But again, to see that gives you some positive vibes for sure.
Tony, going off that hunger that you mentioned, firstly starting off with the returning guys that you've got coming back with Evan and some of those guys with kind of having that taste last year, those last 2 games, what have you seen from them just in, preseason in terms of that hunger and that drive already? And then with younger guys as well coming in, seeing Omaha on the wall and seeing kind of how that standard's been raised since last year?
Yeah, I think for the first time, and I'm not knocking anybody, but I think the incoming guys, just to be super honest, they don't see themselves now as hey, we're going to change what's going on around here, or we're going to do this or that. There's a great deal of respect for what last year's group did. And having said that, I think, again, I don't know if the ranking is fair, and I'm not saying we got any big leaguers in that group or contributors. They're going to have to prove it in the first year group. But I think our returning guys see that, man, these guys they're here for a reason. Physically, they also kind of seem to have the right mindset. So that mutual respect may have been something I could have brought up in one of my other answers for sure there. And then as far as like Luke Lipschitz, Redmond Walsh, Evan Russell, I think what you have is kind of a calming influence. I see professionalism out of those guys. They know how to manage extra reps or just how they interact with the coaching staff. And like any leadership thing, monkey see, monkey do. The younger guys see, okay, it's okay to maybe make fun of Coach Vitello in this way, but don't do it in this way, whatever it might be. And it's kind of bleeding across the entire locker room, whether it be a third-year guy or a second-year guy or first-year guy. Those guys have been here a long, long time now, and it's really going to help our team, not just with their performance, but, again, with that leadership piece.
Tony, got a couple of questions. The first one, I guess, would be about the genesis of that Evan Russell story at catcher. Like, did you approach him? Did he approach you? How did that conversation go?
Yeah, we had when he first came in is where the origin would be. He came in as a guy who hit really well for Team Tennessee at the Sun Belt. He also got a home run, hit a home run off Weathers in front of the right people in high school. And that's really what maybe opened the door for him to be here. And so he was a hitter. So where can this guy play? And he would try and catch, and try and play third base, He got one in the cookies there, and so he moved to the outfield, and he wasn't very good out there. And then last year, I'd call him a plus defender, even though he doesn't have the speed of some of the SEC outfielders. But at the end of the year, to more directly answer your question, we had a very personal conversation. There was a lot of stuff that was talked about. And it was all good. It was more kind of exploratory things. And we really wanted to help Evan with the draft. It didn't work out. So what's the next thing? And out of that conversation came, let's attack this deal right here. It's something new. It's a challenge. It's what the team needs. And it could open the doors to a pro opportunity as well. And so he's back there. And I think the difference between being a freshman and now being calm and mature and knowing what is expected of that position has just really made it flow a lot easier for him. Whether he's the guy or not, it's been a smooth process so far.
And in terms of working toward eventually getting into a weekend rotation. I guess maybe vaguely, how many different guys are in the mix for those 3 spots right now, if you had to guess right now? I know it's early.
Yeah, it is early, and I'm a big fan of competition weekly. I refuse to believe that a kid, his status in our eyes, because we're always evaluating these guys, stays the same over the course of even a week. You don't want to be too erratic with what you're doing with the guys, but they're constantly being evaluated, and I think that's a good thing for competitiveness within our team. Having said that, you can't completely ignore the past, and it's a very powerful thing to have started over the course of a year, like Halverson has, Tidwell has, and then there's been some other guys that have been a hybrid, like a Sewell. So all in all, I think the favorites are probably down to about 6 bodies, and it's because all those guys have started at some point in college baseball or have shown signs as a freshman that they can do that. But, the inner squads are there for a reason. See what we got and give these guys a chance to show what they can and cannot do.
Coach Vitello, 2 questions. First, how do you repeat the success from last year?
Well, I got tongue-tied with, I think I was driving at the same time I was talking to Tony Basilio, and talking to Tony can be a challenge sometimes anyway because he's got personality oozing through the radio there. But what I meant to say was we have presented to our guys that the goal is not to have more wins than last year or to match this or that performance-wise. I appreciate you thought positive of last year in your question, but to me, last year, the fans were on board because of the way our kids played and the type of personalities we had, and we finally kind of had a brand name. And I think Tennessee had been searching for that for a while. There's been great coaches here, and there's absolutely been great individuals that have either signed here or come through here and played, but there just hasn't been a brand name where University of Florida or South Carolina or Mississippi would say, okay, when we play Tennessee, it's this. When we play Arkansas, it's this, or whoever it might be. And we finally kind of have that brand name, and it needs to continue on. And, whoever's the shortstop this year, doesn't need to act exactly like Liam or try and have an Australian accent or anything like that. But, again, kind of that culture, that's a pretty vague word, and it's thrown around a little too often. Again, just kind of that team image and personality we've had really the last couple years. We got cut short. That needs to continue. And if that breeds more success or more wins or the fans stay on board, that'll just be a byproduct of that. But I think that's where our kind of focus is centered around this year.
And the other question is, what do you hope to see out of your inter-squad scrimmage today?
Just competitiveness out of our guys throughout the fall. The one thing that I think college coaches across the board would agree is, you're not going to win or lose any games in the fall, and some guys might hit well in the fall but not in the spring and vice versa. But the way your guys show up every day is kind of a telltale sign of what's to come. If your guys typically don't communicate well on a fly ball in the air in the fall, then odds are that'll show up in the spring unless you really, really correct it. So we're kind of looking for those patterns, and the one pattern we want is for our guys to show up with competitiveness every day because there's a lot of it. I mean, you guys have kind of alluded to it. There's a lot of new faces, but there's also a lot of faces that have been in our dugout, not on the field. So it's kind of open season, not just at the position behind the plate, but at a lot of others.
I feel like you guys saying it's time for a few more, so I'm going to get people who haven't asked yet. So we'll go Ben, we'll go Rick, and then we'll go John and Tim in the back.
Tony, just what have you seen from Chase, Burns early on, and then second and short? You're also missing those guys up the middle, coming back along with catcher. Just who's repping at second and short to start fall ball?
Chase wants to be great, and I don't know if he's ever said that verbally, like most of you probably, although you guys write and talk for a living, so I don't know if that's a good example. But actions speak louder than words in most cases, and he wants to be great. And I also think he realizes, despite all the fanfare and hype, which to me is a little bit unfair, he's a long way away from being that. And that's kind of the attitude he shows up with every day, and his teammates feed off of it. And he's just always got a positive attitude, like I mentioned with a few of the other guys, and gets along really well with the older guys. It doesn't always go down that way when you have a guy that, again, has a little bit of hype to his name for what it's worth. And then up the middle, we've tried a variety of things when we get our infielders out there, guys at different spots. Trey Lipscomb played a great shortstop this summer, but there's a great chance he's the guy to replace Rucker because you got third base as well. Seth Stephenson is a kid who turned down the draft to play in the SEC, and he's about as good of a runner as I've ever seen. So whether it's at second or short, he should be able to cover a lot of ground. And then two guys that were ready to rock and roll if needed was Cortland Lawson and Liam Spence, and they were needed because of Spence's hamstring issues and a couple other things that popped up. So Logan Steenstra and Cortland Lawson have shown some validity there, and then Jarrell Ortega was our best hitter last fall, and he can play in the middle as well. So Chris Moore, who I mentioned before. So I'd like to think if you guys are asking me these questions next February, I can give you better answers. But for now, I think it's great as a coaching staff that we have the answers that we do. This guy will give an opportunity. And who knows, one of those names may end up in left field or they're the DH because they didn't play as good at defense. But for now, I'm all for giving guys full opportunity to show they can play any position on the field for us.
Coach, obviously the crowd capacity did increase kind of throughout the season. How excited are you just to approach a full season kind of with that support that did show up last season?
More than you know. I can't put it into dictionary type words, but kind of get a little energy. That's better than coffee bringing that up. Let's put it that way. And I think our team has a brand name on the field, and then I could ask you guys in the room, because you guys travel around, what's this team's fans like? How would you characterize this team's fans? And you would probably have a quick 2 or 3 words about how they act or their reputation, fair or not stereotypes. You could stereotype our fans whatever way you want, but they don't sit on their hands. They're rowdy, and they're into it. And it impacts the way our guys play. Our kids feed off of it. And it quite honestly makes the other team uncomfortable. And having said that, there's also other teams that continually complement the environment they saw when they were in our stadium this past year. So that's me trying to put my arms around a topic that's one of my favorites, and we're appreciative of it, and we recognized how it can help us be successful next year. So construction or not, whenever it happens, if we can just let them all in, and we can even add some spots to just surround the whole thing, again, maybe it makes the opponent uncomfortable or not. I don't know. I don't have control over those guys. But what it'll do is it'll excite our kids to come to the park every day at home. And then recruiting, the most important word in this whole deal, it's helped us a lot, and the kids recognize it.
John, and thanks for them.
With the addition of Halverson and Dollander, what's it like for them to start working with Frank? And then also, is there any different to a feel when they come in from another program as opposed to a senior becoming a freshman or somebody coming from the junior college ranks?
Yeah, as charming as I try to be sometimes, I think those two kids are here because they wanted to work with Frank. I mean, one was a very quick decision, really immediately upon entering the transfer portal. And then the other one, Chase had a lot of suitors, and he remembered us from playing them at the beginning of the year. But ultimately, as he dove in, I think working with Q in the weight room and getting with Frank was the key there. And so it's a slower process, actually. It involves kind of diving into, what did you do there so that we're not completely doing something different, or we understand maybe this is why you do this or that. And then those two guys will start throwing off the mound to hitters later than the others so that Coach Anderson could get some one-on-one time with those guys. And again, not only get to know them and kind of what their background is because they're older, but kind of implement some of the things that he had been scheming on doing all summer long. Once they signed on the dotted line, it's easy to pull video off those guys. And, heck, you could just pull up our scouting reports and go off that a little bit too. So it's been fun to stand back and be an innocent bystander and watch that process. So it'll be nice to see if those guys can progress as, you'd like to see anyone progress as they get older, but in particular working with a guy like Coach A that I don't know how he does it, but he does it.
Coach, you talked about the fans and how rowdy they were and whatnot in the stadium. But when you got off the elevator on Father's Day in that hotel and seeing what was there, can you kind of just take us into your head and what your thoughts were when you walked off the elevator and there were the 1,000 people there cheering you guys on?
Yeah, if I let you too far inside my head, I'll lose this job. But there's some goofy thoughts that pop into there for whatever reason. But I'm Italian, which, try to keep the temper under control during games. Most times it happens, but I got some Irish blood in me, and the emotional side kind of came out getting off that elevator. That was a shocking deal and tough to compose yourself. I mean, it's a long way from game time, so it's not like you're going to get overly hyped or overly emotional. But in that moment, normally I kind of just charge onto the bus and I in the last one, and then we take off. And with that one, for some reason I had the wherewithal to say, slow down a minute and soak this in. It's tough to get to that spot. And then it's up to Vol fans whether they want to make that a tradition or not. So somehow I was able to have those calming thoughts for once and not just steamroll through that whole thing. And I can still see some faces. And I've met people either on the street or tailgating at a football game, and I've recognized them, and they've said, high-fived or whatever, you walked past me. And that's something that'll never go away from my mind. And I know with our kids, too, it's something they take away from last year as one of the magical or memorable moments.
Thanks, Coach. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.